What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Mass Media Hysteria. It is September 26th. My name is Court. I will be your host for the duration. With me, as always, is Chris.
How's it going, everybody?
And down below, making his once again triumphant return, we have Andris.
Howdy.
And we got a pretty stacked show for you today. We got a bunch of things we're going to talk about. Let me just bring up my little list here. First off, it's going to be really, really quick. I'm just going to have a few remarks about the new Mike Flanagan Netflix miniseries, Midnight Mass, which dropped on Netflix this past Friday. Then we're going to talk about some news. It's looking like Hollywood may go on strike. It could be a really big thing, the biggest thing since the writer's strike. This might actually impact Hollywood even more so than COVID, perhaps, because they did find a way to work through that. We are going to talk a little bit about Doctor Who, a TV show that Chris and Andris are both fans of. I know nothing about it, never got into it, but apparently in 2005, when the show was rebooted under showrunner Russell T Davies, he later departed the show. He's now returning to showrun the series going forward, at least for the time being. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to do a couple of fully spoiler reviews for you. We will be reviewing the first episode of Godzilla Singular Point. The episode is called Terzetto. Dominic Terzetto. That's a stupid joke, and I'm sorry I made it.
Godzilla is all about family.
And then finally, we are going to do a full spoilers review of a Netflix movie that went up on the streaming service back on Wednesday. It's a home invasion film called Intrusion. There is a non-spoiler review on my channel if you want to check that out, but we're going to be going full spoilers. I asked these guys to watch it, and they did me that solid. So we're going to talk about all those. That'll be the show for today. Before I move forward, of course, we want to encourage you, if you enjoy this podcast, drop a like on the video, share it around. Of course, it helps the video reach more people. It helps the channel grow. We appreciate that very much. And of course, we want to encourage you as well to jump into the comments. Tell us whatever you thought about the topics we were talking about here today. I do read all the comments. I respond when I can, so don't think your comments are going unread. And finally, assuming you believe that we all have faces for radio, except for Chris, of course, we do have audio. Man. Right. Looks like Sam Rockwell. We do have audio versions of this podcast on places like Spotify and Google Podcasts. So definitely go over and check those out if you want to download it for when you go for a run or whatever it is you do. So without further ado, we are going to go into our, our first topic today, which I will keep it very brief. Midnight Mass is a new sort of horror drama mystery miniseries. It's 7 episodes. They're all about an hour long. It is from creator, showrunner, writer, director Mike Flanagan. If Mike Flanagan's name sounds familiar to you, he of course did the entire first season, the Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. He later was involved in The Haunting of Bly Manor, although he only, I believe, directed the pilot. He did all of Haunting of Hill House. I loved both of those series. Hill House was better, but Bly Manor was really good. He was also the director of Stephen King's Dr. Sleep from a couple of years ago, Stephen King's Gerald's Game from 2017. He did Oculus. He did Ouija Origin of Evil, which I have not seen. He did a film called Hush, which I've also not seen. Midnight Mass is awesome. It is. I binged it in 2 days. I loved it. It's one of those things, the man knows how to cast a show. He knows how to write a show. Again, I do have a spoiler-free review on my channel if you want to check that out. But it is, I really encourage people, if you like sort of slow burn, religious drama, it's really, really good. It is spooky. It is a little bit slow to get going, but once it really gets on its way, it really gets on its way. And it's I will say this, the final moments of the finale left me absolutely speechless. It cut to black and I just kind of sat there for 2 minutes in silence, and I just went, holy shit. So huge huge recommendation for me. It's on Netflix right now. Midnight Mass Media Hysteria. It's really, really good. So check that out. moving on, because these guys have not watched it anyway. I don't want to spend too much time. So we're going to talk about the Hollywood strike. So there is a union in Hollywood called IATSE, which stands for, Chris?
International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees.
So basically what this covers is, it's not producers, it's not writers, it's not directors, it's not actors. They all have their own unions or guilds. But this covers carpenters, electricians, cinematographers, possibly even caterers, the sort of lifeblood of making a movie happen. All of those people, and they are threatening to go on strike. Basically, the union leader basically put out a vote, so they have to vote whether or not they want to, not specifically strike yet, but basically for permission to strike, and then they will go from there. So what this means is that, and I mean, this would be similar to the writer's strike of, when was it? Like,
it was either 2007 or 2008, because I remember like Quantum of Solace was heavily affected by it, and that came out in 2008.
Right.
Yeah.
So that pretty much shut down Hollywood. This could very well do the same. And literally, I mean, anything that's in the can at this point will still come out, but anything that's in post-production, editors are covered under IATSE. That could be a thing. And my biggest thing is, please don't push the Batman again.
You're right.
I really want to see that movie.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
This is huge. I think that it would be even bigger and more catastrophic than the writer's strike, because the writer's strike, it affected everything in Hollywood. However, when it came to films, they just kind of pushed forward. Now, we got some pretty dismal screenplays in the year that followed, from everything from kind of the messy Quantum of Solace, where Daniel Craig himself said that he had to do like some writing day of on set just because literally nobody else could, and they're like, what the hell? And he's gone on record saying, I'm not a writer. But they found workarounds. They were able to still push forward. With this, there's absolutely nothing to be done, meaning if they strike, there are no workers. So as Court was mentioning, this union covers so many different essentially
disciplines.
Different disciplines in different areas of part of the filmmaking process, from production assistants to electrical grips is what they're referred to as, essentially the people who make movies, not the ones calling the shots necessarily, but the people who make movies. And if they are on strike, there's no one to make it, and including editing. So everything from pre-production to production to post-production. So there's no workarounds. It's not like you can have Daniel Craig just move the lights around, on production. This will shut down everything, which is why, I don't know, this is why I've been kind of keeping my ear very close to this story, because again, I think that one of the differences between this and the writer's strike is that Hollywood was a bit cocky back in the and during the writer's strike, of thinking we can continue. Well, I remember distinctly there were still late night shows like Stephen Colbert at the time, or Conan O'Brien, that they were still going on, and they're like, I'm just writing my own stuff. It was very much looser, but they kept pushing forward. They can't do it here. So that's why I think that Hollywood is probably more likely to play ball with their demands to make sure that like this is nipped in the bud.
Well, even the previous writer's strike, which I don't know, maybe like 98, something like that, somewhere around there. That's really what gave rise to reality television, because they didn't need writers. They could just pay people to get drunk in an apartment. But now they can't do that either, because you can't have someone working a camera. You can't have someone editing. Like literally, this is going to grind the industry to a complete halt if it happens. And one of the things that the union is asking for is, better safety precautions on set, more rest time, more time off, because you have to keep in mind, I mean, not that like actors, directors, writers don't work their asses off. They absolutely do. I mean, a day on set can be 12 hours, if not more. You have to get there very early in the morning to set up. So like a lot of these workers get very, very little sleep. And of course, if you don't have extreme safety precautions, when people are tired, mistakes happen. And of course, now you've got the added COVID thing. So I don't know. I don't even know if like they call them COVID cops, who are the people on set making sure everything is copacetic. I don't know if they would be covered under IATSE, but still.
Now, that would be a reality show. COVID cops.
Right.
Cups.
I would watch that show.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so and now we're seeing that a lot of actors from the Screen Actors Guild are throwing in their support behind IATSE, which I think is a great thing. I will say, like, don't take my movies away. I love my movies, but it's all about equity. It's all about safety. I'm for this strike if it has to happen. I mean, that's the point of unions, to empower people who maybe wouldn't necessarily have much of a voice, to get fair and equitable treatment. So, as much as I don't want the movies to go away, I support this fully. And like you were saying, Chris, I hope that the producers in Hollywood will play ball, and I suspect you might be right. Andris, let me ask you first. Where do you stand on this? Do you support this? What are your thoughts?
No, it sounds like the right thing to do. My biggest question is, what are the opposers to this? What are their arguments in favor of saying no to this? Because this sounds pretty like, yeah, you're a garbage person if you don't agree with this. But it's like, what's the counterpoint is my question.
There really isn't like a legitimate counterpoint other than the fact of like, well, we're technically paying you minimum wage. It's sort of one of those things of they believe like, oh, well, we're technically paying you minimum wage and you don't have to work here, yada yada. There's this feeling within the industry, and I've only ever been on the teeniest bits of outskirts of film industry as like a production assistant or a grip myself in certain like commercials and shit, like very low budget commercials. And the feeling is like they harbor this mentality of like, you should feel grateful to be here. You're working on television shows and movie shows. You're getting paid minimum wage. So what do you complain about? That's the argument. So it's not a good one.
Yeah, it's not a good one, because then it just makes you look like a giant douchebag to people who are gonna come see your movies. Let's do it. Make it better for the people who make it work.
Chris, where are you standing on this?
Yeah, I support it 100%. Again, I've not worked like in Hollywood. I've not worked in Los Angeles, but I'm an aspiring filmmaker myself. So I've gone out and kind of been a part as many sets and video productions that I can be, like paid ones as well, whether it's for commercials or music videos or short films. And it's a rough job, especially being essentially a stagehand, a production assistant, a electrical grip. Like a lot of the reports are saying, you're working, sometimes upwards of 18 hours a day for minimum wage, with like barely any rest, barely, lunch breaks or anything. Sometimes you're denied bathroom breaks just because it's like, we literally don't have time. We just have to get in, get out. So there really is kind of this mentality from kind of higher ups and producers of like, these people working in these lowly positions are like cattle. You just gotta, you throw enough people at a problem and they'll fix it. But they're people. And this is hard freaking work. And literally part of me mentioning up top that this would collapse the industry is the fact that you cannot make a movie without crew. You just can't. Film is one of the most collaborative of art forms. And I think that the time of taking the actual filmmakers, like these people, taking away their due or not giving them the credit that they deserve, I think it should be over. And I think that, with what they're asking for is not even, if it seems logical. It seems like, give us more rest breaks, give us health benefits, make sure that people aren't working 18 or 24-hour days. It's normal stuff. There's nothing like egregious about what's being demanded.
Right.
So I'm all for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll move on, but I guess we'll pose the question to you guys watching. What do you think about this? Do you, I don't want to say do you support the workers, because
If it's a bad take if you're Mr. Money, like unless you're Mr.
Right.
Moneybags, I don't know why you'd be like, oh, these workers, they should just get back in line.
I guess the question I will pose then is, if this strike does happen, what is the movie or TV show that you're going to be super bummed about not necessarily coming anytime soon? For me, it's going to be the Batman, possibly the final season of Better Call Saul. Chris, any thoughts?
Oh, I think the Batman for me. I think that would be my number one. Again, it'll be worth it. And I think that even, everyone from Matt Reeves to probably the cast is like, yeah, I feel like they would support it. But, the Batman. It's, you know what I mean? Like, go on strike if you need to, get what you deserve. But I really hope that Hollywood just plays ball so we get that March release of Batman.
Andris, any specific things that would bum you out?
I live under a rock and I don't keep up with current events. So
all right then.
So no, he's all for it.
Okay, so we're gonna move on, and we're gonna talk about. When I say we, I mean they are going to talk about Doctor Who. So I'll throw it to you guys, and I'll be over here when you need me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Andres, do you want to spearhead this one, or do you want me to take it? It's your call.
Well, I guess we could real quick we could set up what is your experience with, like, how did you get into Doctor Who?
Me? Doctor Who has kind of always been in my peripheral. Growing up, especially in like the early 2000s on Sci-Fi Channel, they would play out of order and such, just episodes of Doctor Who, everything from I should say the revival of Doctor Who, which we'll touch on. And they would show like, Christopher Eccleston and then David Tennant. And I was a kid, so I didn't like quite understand like why are there different actors playing them? Because again, they played it like out of order.
Yeah.
I was aware of it. I always thought it was a bit of a cornball show. So I really didn't give it a chance until after Russell T Davies had left. I got in during the Matt Smith era. So Doctor number 11. But because I got into it, that's when I went back and I not only started watching the revival series from 2005, but I started watching the classic era series from BBC back in the 60s. So in a way, it was kind of the Russell T Davies series that got me into Doctor Who. It got me into the entire franchise. And again, looking backwards to the 60s. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. Doctor Who was really big in the United States, and I'm assuming Canada as well for a bit. It seems to kind of die down in momentum, but for a bit it was quite popular, and I think that you could trace it back to the revival of 2005, which again was spearheaded by Russell T Davies. So, Andres, how did you first get into the series?
It's largely similar to your story. My parents were Doctor Who fans. I always wanted to check it out, but we're talking the 90s and the 2000s. We didn't have, like Netflix at that point or any kind of streaming services. So this revival hits the TV and I'm like, I can watch this. Followed for a while, fell off after a while. I got dissatisfied with the successor of Russell T Davies, who was Stephen Moffat. And then what also happened, though, was with the arrival of YouTube and tube sites, suddenly we had access to the old series. And that's when it was like, the more I got into the old series and started watching it, the more I was pushing out the revival, because the old series just appeals to me way more. It's a 26 season B movie. And that is where I am. I've given each showrunner a chance, but I do give up after a while with the new ones, and we'll get to that.
For anyone that's maybe not that is kind of unaware of Doctor Who, essentially it's a show that was created in the 1960s in England for BBC. It's a time traveling science fiction show of an alien who doesn't have a name. They just refer to him as Doctor Who, or just the Doctor. And he's a time traveling. He has a police phone box that can travel back in time across dimensions. So it was a very popular show in England at the time. And it ran, I believe, from like the 1960s through the 1980s. But after 26 seasons and not really gaining anything more than a bit of a cult following around the world, because it wasn't a huge, massive success. It was very much like a British show that aimed not primarily at children, but it was very kind of family friendly entertainment. There was nothing too scandalous about it. There was nothing too mean spirited about it. And so there was an original series, and then it was kind of done. From the 90s, they had some stuff, like there was a TV movie that came out in the 90s, but there really wasn't much talk about it. And again, it wasn't this international success. But in 2005, they did a revival. And that's what I think a lot of people mostly know from Doctor Who, is that from 2005 onward, it's been continuing. It's taken the same premise, but just bringing it to the modern era, updating the special effects. They get better with each season. It's even the first revival season from 2005 has some kind of wonky special effects.
Yes, it does.
But again, I think that you can't understate just how popular the series had become because of the revival.
Yes,
like it existed since the 60s, but it only really became this kind of worldwide phenomenon for two reasons. One, because we live in kind of the digital age, so it's easier to share things. But two, because of, I'd say, the first 4 seasons, which is what the original showrunner Russell T Davies covered. So from season 1 in 2005, and I think he ended in 2009, early 2010.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And that included Christopher Eccleston as the original Doctor. He played 1 season. And then most famously, David Tennant as Doctor Who number 10, the 10th Doctor. And that's been a fan favorite. And I feel like most fans of the show, even ones that still kind of hang on, they kind of point to that era as the best of the revival.
It is. It's the least controversial, even though it does have its controversies, but that's another topic. That's the interesting thing, though, about the fact that they're bringing back Davies as a showrunner, in my opinion, because what the show was 10 years ago versus now, there is a decline. I feel like they were at the 11th hour with cancellation. And then all of a sudden they bring Davies back. That's very bold. As I said, he was the least controversial of the showrunners, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens next, because they got to get it right. They gotta,
Yeah. I mean, for every kind of beloved, franchise such as this, especially if it's kind of a fantasy or science fiction property, you look at Star Wars, you look at Star Trek, the fans, there's never going to be like 100% agreement on everything. There's some people that love the Star Wars prequels. There's people that hate it. There's people that love the sequels. There's people that hate it. So, but it's one of those rare instances where people seem to generally, like the majority of the fan base seems pretty okay with the Russell T Davies run era. And that, like you said, after that, not only that, but you kind of get a bit of a decline. I think, it was propped up because of David Tennant, and then people were cool with Matt Smith. But ever since then, they had Peter Capaldi come on as the 12th Doctor, and then Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, I believe. Yeah. And they had another showrunner after Stephen Moffat. I don't know his name.
Chris Chibnall, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I think anybody can kind of, even if you're not a fan of it, I think that if you're just looking at like pop culture osmosis, I think that there was a time when Doctor Who was pretty big. Like you'd see merchandise for it in stores and people talk about it. Now you don't really see that much anymore. Like I've stopped watching it too, and not because of like I hate this, man. It just kind of fell. I just kind of fell off interest. My wife and I were huge into it. Hold on, just a second. It's saying that the meeting, Court, is going to be ending in 10 minutes.
What?
I don't know why. Okay, so we're going to cut this out, but give me 2 seconds, okay?
And we're back. Zoom problems. I'm going to go back to looking at my phone, and you guys go back to talking about Doctor Who.
We don't have too much more to say other than the fact that Andris and I think that we can both agree that this is a sign from producers and studio heads that Doctor Who has not been going in the direction that they wanted it to. I think they're noticing a decline in ratings or a decline in popularity and everything from merchandise. And so what are they doing? They're doing the Hail Mary of like, let's bring back the guy that revitalized this in the first place, hoping that he's probably going to inject, have the same kind of life-saving injection into the arm of the series that he did back in 2005.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Do you think, though, is this enough to bring you back in?
To bring me back in,
Oh boy.
Well, the problem is I've become such an old series fan that I'm glad that we're all calling it a reboot over here, because the official story is it's a continuation of the same series, but they're not the same thing at all.
Yeah, they started off trying to keep with continuity, but at this point they've really just been like, fuck it.
They just went in a different direction and they've changed things and they've added things. I give every showrunner a chance, about 5 episodes per season. I will give them that chance to win me over before I just give up, because I'm just like, nah, I don't like what you're doing. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna come back.
I'll wait to hear. I'll kind of keep an eye out, because I was already, even before this news, I was interested at least checking it out at some point, because I have been such a big fan of the show that I was like, you know what, I should see the end of what Capaldi did, and I'll see what Jodie Whittaker has done, because I like her as an actress. So I've heard from people that, any problems that they have with modern Doctor Who is not necessarily her fault. It's just kind of like the showrunners or the direction it's gone in. But yeah, so I was going to check it out anyway, but if season, I don't know what season it's going to be, 13, 14?
14.
So this isn't even going to happen until 2023 technically, but whenever he comes back, if people are saying, you know what, it's back to feeling like it did in 2005, then I'd be interested. I'd check it out. But I don't know, I'm probably not going to be racing to watch the premiere episode whenever it happens.
Yes. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm so detached from the revival now at this point that I'm just like, all right.
Yeah, well,
Go,
too little, too late.
My only wish is that they would be a little more aggressive about getting people to watch the old series, because to this day, nobody knows about the BritBox streaming service. The streaming service. The BritBox streaming service, which grants you access to all 26 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, the main page, the official Facebook page, never mentions it. Fans are always shocked when they hear about it. And it's just that frustrates me as an old series fan, because it's like, you should watch this. Come on, man.
Yeah, it's all about the future, about the new. All right. Well, there you go, guys. So Russell T Davies is coming back. If you're interested, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, leave a comment. Does this excite you? Are you interested in returning to the series? Have you stuck with the series even through the different changes of showrunners throughout the years? Let us know in the comments down below. And now, Court, his ears have perked back up. He realizes that the boring conversation about British silly shenanigans is over, and on to more pressing news. No, I'm just joking. I know you don't.
It's not that it's boring. It's just I don't know.
It's not your thing. It's a niche show.
Sure, as somebody who had to sit through all those Marvel shows, it's nice for the tables to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was just news. We subjected you to listen to like beat by beat reviews, but
and then Captain America did this.
Okay, so we are gonna move on, and we're going to do our review of Godzilla Singular Point, Episode 1, Terzetto. So this is it's a Japanese show, from what I can tell. It is dubbed in English, of course. It's in the style of anime. These guys asked me to watch it, so I did. I'm not a big Godzilla guy. I'm not a huge kaiju guy. I'm not a big anime guy. So unsurprisingly, this didn't really do much for me. There were a couple of moments towards the end that I did think were cool. There were a couple of funny moments, but I didn't really engage with it so much. So I think probably what I'll do is let you guys sort of host the review, and I'll sort of pop in when I have a thought. Does that work?
Yeah, totally.
Sounds groovy.
So yeah, I mean, again, the Andris and I are big Godzilla fans, like massive. If you've seen the other episodes we've done, especially talking about Godzilla versus Kong, or was it? It was even 2 weeks ago. It was one of our topics. We're just going over kaiju. So I was telling Andres before we started recording that I only watched the first episode of this anime series, but I feel like that was a mistake because the show really feels like it was very much intended to be binged. It wasn't something that's broken up kind of episodically in the sense of like the story just feels like watch it all at once because there's not much to say really
Yeah.
about this first episode. It really is just setup. It's just here are these characters. Here's what they do. One's, they're all very kind of techie people. Like this woman is kind of like she's into seemingly cryptozoology kind of stuff. She's like a biologist. She's very smart. And there's another guy with white hair that's also very smart. And it's just kind of setting them up and nothing really happens. So afterwards, I was like, I don't really have too much to say about this particular episode. I'd be interested in watching more because we barely got a glimpse of any kaiju. We barely got any glimpse of any giant monsters, which is mainly why people tune into Godzilla properties.
You'd
And
think.
yeah, and because we didn't get that, it's hard really to say one thing or the other. I didn't think it was bad. I mean, the animation looked on par with other anime shows of this era. Like you, Court, I'm not really into anime shows. I like anime movies. Like I'm a big fan of the Studio Ghibli, but not only that, but other ones too. That like there was a recent movie called Your Name from 2016, which is absolutely incredible. So I'm interested in anime movies, but anime shows, not much. It's a definitely a very like genre specific audience it's reaching for. And yeah, this one didn't do too much for me. Andres, your thoughts?
I am surprised how under the radar this show is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about it. A Godzilla anime. Nobody ever talked about this when it came out. This came out months ago.
Mm.
Totally under the radar. I know you, Chris, watched the previous animated Godzilla offerings, or attempted to at least.
Yeah, I watched like 1 3/4 of it because I just kind of gave up.
Yeah, it's weird. It's interesting that Toho is going in this direction, but it's a step in the right direction. I agree with you though that not much happens. I watched some people, they like to watch it in Japanese with the subtitles. This is not something you can do with that if you don't speak Japanese. It's overwhelming. Even in English, I noticed it is obscenely verbose. Just so many words, just these paragraphs of phrases just being thrown at you at like just fast, da, 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 and you're like, wow, oh my god. Which I think might ultimately have a hand in the fact that because it's a show and they can't really show too much, they're just trying to fill time.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But I mean, it's interesting. I'm happy they went with a more hand-drawn technique instead of the 3D CG that they did with the last one. But yeah, no, I agree with you. There isn't much to go with. It's not a good pilot episode, if you will. You gotta sit down and watch more.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I believe the episode was about 22 minutes long, and just kind of nothing happens until the last 2 or 3 minutes. And I didn't really care. The one moment that I did enjoy before we meet some monsters is when the girl gets what she thinks is the virus on her computer, and it turns out to be this AI, and it's just kind of like messing with her, whatever. I thought that was kind of cute. I got a couple of chuckles out of that. There was one moment visually that I really liked where I think it was the two dudes who, like, I don't know, they come across as like ghost hunters or something. They're driving and they drive through a bridge and then they stop and they're just like surrounded by foliage. And I thought the foliage looked really, really pretty. That frame really stood out to me for whatever reason.
Something that I've noticed about a lot of kind of modern anime and again, I'm really not too well versed in it, but the animation itself is always a bit stiff, but the drawing, especially of like scenery, is gorgeous. There was some shots, of literally just nothing's really happening. It's just them driving through this small kind of Japanese village, and there's so much detail that's put into like the backgrounds that it's really just kind of, it's pretty to look at the very least.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So towards the end, admittedly, I watched this 3.5 hours ago, and I already don't really remember what happened. But yeah, they sort of, the ghost hunters are investigating. There's this signal coming out of this house from a secret room, and it's this sort of weird like Indian pop song or something, and they have to trace the signal. Something, I don't know. And then at the end, a kaiju shows up, and that was cool. I thought the kaiju was cool. They're like, "Is that a drone? What is that?" And then the thing lands on the roof, and it looked pretty.
Rodan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really don't know my stuff here, but
That is all right. We do.
yeah, you guys got me. No, I thought it looked pretty cool. It was roaring. That's cool.
Yeah, what's a bummer is that, again, I don't need to reiterate that I'm not too well versed in anime, blah blah blah. But I will say that similarly, a show I was into for a couple seasons, I kind of fell off, but I would probably revisit. It's called Attack on Titan, which I think you might have heard of because it became very, very popular. But that is an example of, if you're not, especially if you're not even into anime, of a first episode that uses every minute just like with such purpose, where it right off the bat, it introduces the scope, it tells the story without feeling like too exposition-y. It gives you some action. For anyone that doesn't know, Attack on Titan, it's kind of set in this fantasy medieval world-ish, and there's literally titans, very tall, scary. They look like people without any skin, and they just like destroy buildings. So it's also very kaiju-like. Like, again, in the pilot episode, you're in it. You understand the characters, you understand their motivations, you understand the threat, you understand the scope, and it's pretty engaging. And then this is just like, okay, they're into technology. You don't really know the characters that well.
It's overwhelming.
It's simultaneously overwhelming and underwhelming in that nothing happens, and you're told and shown these characters are smart, these characters are into technology, but you don't care about them, and there's no goal yet that they're trying to achieve other than like, oh, there's a song being transmitted. That's weird.
Yeah, it's something that could have been established in 5 minutes, but it's like, because they had to stretch it out for whatever reason. Oh man, she's like sleeping and she's talking about geometry equations or some shit, and then she wakes up, or it was like the taxonomy or something. I don't know, but it was just, it's tricky, but no, I do agree. Should watch more.
Since I'm only because I'm a fan of Godzilla. Like, if this was just random anime, I wouldn't watch anymore. But I'm a fan of Godzilla, so I'm like, all right, I'll give a few more episodes. Maybe when Godzilla himself shows up and it gets really cool, and it gets kind of Attack on Titan-y in the sense of you get to see destruction, you get to see weird chaos, and shit actually happens. But until then, it's kind of boring.
One weird thing I'm going to mention to both of you guys, you can both speak on this. The scale of the monsters is kind of weird.
Yeah, so far, I mean, we've only really seen Rodan, and
we've seen 3.
Have we?
Yeah, you saw Jet Jaguar, you saw Rodan.
Oh yeah.
Technically, from what I know, that was Godzilla at the end.
Yeah, it looked like a skeleton. So all right, so you saw 2. Only one of them was alive or in motion. But yeah, it's so far Rodan it just seems about the scale of, like, I guess what an actual pterodactyl would have been. Yeah, if you've seen like a skeleton. But you go into this wanting things that are several stories high, so it's a little bit odd. It's a different take on it, I guess. I wasn't too bothered,
but I mean, we're gonna have to see where they're going with it. Why? Maybe there's a reason they're small right now. Maybe they get bigger later. I don't know. We'll find out though.
Yeah, maybe it'll start devouring people, and
get bigger as
every person it eats, it just grows.
Right.
There you go.
That would be awesome.
Don't have much else to say, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm there with you. So I guess we'll move on to our final topic. We are going to be reviewing the new Netflix film Intrusion, which is a sort of home invasion thriller directed by a man named Adam Salke. It stars Logan Marshall Green and Frida Pinto. And it came out on Netflix on Wednesday. I reviewed it on Wednesday. I already don't remember this movie very well. But I'll tell you guys, and I said this in my spoiler-free review, the first thing that stood out to me in this movie was every time I've seen Logan Marshall Green in something, he looks exactly like Tom Hardy. And in this movie, he didn't look like Tom Hardy. He looked like a young Guy Pearce, like strikingly so to my eyes.
I could see it. I think it was the hair.
I think it was the hair.
I was getting Joel Kinnaman vibes from his presence.
I could kind of see that too.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
I actually found it distracting. But so
your face.
Yeah. So the basic premise of this film is Frida Pinto is married to Logan Marshall Green. He's an architect. They've recently moved out of Boston because it was such a rat race, and now they live in this little sort of country town. And he's built this gorgeous house that I want to live in. We also find out very early on that she's in remission of breast cancer, and she sort of finds a lump, so she's very worried about that. Meanwhile, early on in the film, they decide to go out for date night, and they come home to find their place ransacked, torn apart, but nothing was stolen, which is weird. They go to the police get involved, and it kind of goes from there. So before we sort of get into the story beats, Andris, I'm going to throw it to you first. What were your overall impressions of Intrusion?
Well, I know last time I said that Malignant was the film of the year, but Malignant is still the film of the year. I want to throw you guys for a loop. I gave it a shrug. I'm like, okay.
All right, Chris, what about you?
Yeah, it's just kind of a mediocre movie. It definitely gave me vibes of a kind of a made-for-television film of like the 80s and 90s. I haven't watched a ton of Netflix original movies, and the ones that I do watch are usually the ones that they kind of like prop up. Let's say Marriage Story or The Irishman, that also like simultaneously get like a theatrical release.
Right.
I've seen a few that have just been just for Netflix, and a lot of them give me this similar vibe as this one, Intrusion, that again it's just feels like made for TV. Like
right.
The direction, it's not bad, it's just boring, and it's competent. The writing is meh but not terrible. The acting is okay but not memorable or not terrible. Just nothing really about it stands out. It just feels like if this came out in the 90s, minus all the narrative details involving smartphones and such, this could fit right in with just kind of a movie of the week that premieres on like a Thursday night on ABC. It's just kind of pulpy, and it's not terrible. It's not embarrassingly bad. It's just not really special in any regard.
Yeah, it's kind of where I was at. Was just like it's capably made. It's adequately acted. I did think there were some really genuinely pretty cool shots in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the story is, I've seen it before. I didn't really like the dialogue all that much. And it's just kind of like you said, Chris, it's just kind of mediocre. It just kind of meanders. It's not a particularly long film, and I did find that it moves pretty well. Like I was never particularly interested, but I was never bored in the sense of like, all right, let's pick up the pace. Like it was constantly in forward motion. But I was never made to care about any of these characters. That's kind of where I'm at on that. So shall we go through the plot a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so and again, I watched this back on Wednesday, so you guys will have to help me out a little bit. But yeah, so they come home to their place having been ransacked. They get the police involved. At first, the police are sort of looking at the husband, Logan Marshall Green, a little bit suspicious like. And then eventually we find out, or sorry, a little bit later in the film, they wake up in the middle of the night. The power's out. Logan Marshall Green goes to check the generator. It's been destroyed. And then we realize there are people in their house. And so and the people are clearly, wearing mass balaclavas, whatever. They're clearly searching for something. Logan Marshall Green pulls out a gun that his wife didn't know that he had. He tells her to run. He drops her off the balcony. And basically she goes and hides in the car. We hear gunshots. Then he shows up at the car. He killed the other 3 people. And we sort of jump forward a little bit, and we find out one of them is still alive in the hospital. The other 2 are dead. They were all this family of essentially criminals, drug addicts, what have you. And so the cops are looking into them, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, we also learn from the police that a female member of this family, I believe they're the Cobb family, she disappeared recently. So that adds a twist, I guess, in some stretch of the imagination.
Tries to.
Say what?
Tries to.
Yeah. One night, Logan Marshall Green decides to drive into town to go to the grocery store, forgets his wallet. She tries to call him. She leaves him a message saying, okay, I'm just going to follow you, catch up to you, give you your wallet. But then she finds he takes a different route and he doesn't go into town where the grocery is. And she's confused by that. She calls him out when he gets home, and he somehow seemingly convinces her that everything is copacetic, what have you. And eventually she ends up looking on the GPS to where he went. She goes there, and it's where the Cobb family lived. She does some snooping around. She finds a video camera. She brings it home. A guy attacks her and like busts the video camera. She brings it home. She tries to look at the video, and it's the patriarch of the family saying something about, saw how this guy was looking at my daughter. I knew it was him, blah, blah, blah. But then the tape gets all messed up. So she has to order a new one. It's like, I'm getting bored even just telling the story right now, to be honest with you. But basically she starts getting suspicious of her husband. Once again, he convinces her that everything's fine. They decide to have a party. And then during the party, I guess she ends up looking at the videotape or something in his office that gets her thinking something's not right. And she ends up finding a secret compartment in his office that leads down to like a torture chamber, essentially. And down there, tied up, is the girl, the daughter of from this family who's been missing. So we find out that her husband is like basically a psychopath and has to torture this woman because that's just how his brain is wired. And I will say, maybe 20 minutes into this movie, and I was like, it's the husband. Like, it came across pretty clear to me anyway. And then, she tries to save the girl, and then he comes down and he ties them both back up and whatever, but then she gets away. And then, okay, listen, I understand that in horror movies and thriller movies, people do things that don't make logical sense because they have to move the story forward. Okay. I get it. But there's a scene where she breaks free and she's trying to get the girl free, and he hasn't come back down yet. There's a baseball bat lying on the floor. And instead of taking the baseball bat for protection or to, hobble him if he comes after them, she leaves it on the floor inexplicably. It's just like, oh, come on. Like, dude, like, give us, the audience, like a little bit of credit. Come on. Like, and so he comes back and it just gets repetitive. Now, I do want to state a retraction. I said in my non-spoiler review that one thing that really confused me about this movie is there's a moment towards the end of the film where they're like running up the stairs and he's chasing them. And they use this like speed ramping, which is like, that's the Zack Snyder special where they speed things up and then slow things down. I was like, I don't mind speed ramping. It can look cool, but it was so out of place in this moment because they didn't use it anywhere else in the movie. And then I realized, I don't think they actually did that. I think my Netflix was just like stuttering a little bit. So
yeah, because I didn't notice that at all.
Mea culpa. Well, maybe I should blame Netflix really, or maybe my internet provider. But so we'll eschew with that. That was fine. There was one moment that I really liked, and I'm really going on here, so I'm going to throw it over to you guys in a second. But there's a moment where during the party where she goes into the office and starts figuring everything out. And what I said in the non-spoiler review is we talked on the show fairly recently about cool shots are cool, but if there's intent behind them, behind why they're shot that way, that makes it even cooler. In this case, the intent behind it was so on the nose in that like her world is literally being turned upside down. She's literally realizing her husband is a psychopath. And then they like flip the camera as it's panning over.
Oh,
Yeah.
Which I thought was at once cheesy and obvious, but also it was still a cool shot. Like I thought it looked cool. I liked it. I appreciated that. Did that stand out to you guys?
Yeah. So I was mixed on it because it started off and I kind of chuckled out loud because she discovers essentially like, oh, it is her husband. And this was right after she had already confronted him and he gave her a pretty convincing lie. Convincing to her, not convincing to the audience, because like you said, even if you didn't know the specifics, I think it's pretty obvious early on that this guy's up to no good. It's very apparent. So
well,
she just what's that?
The score is they're just ringing the dinner bell for danger every time he's on screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on the score because I actually thought it was quite bad. Not bad. I'll get into it, but
I mentioned that in my other review too. So yeah, we'll get into that.
I didn't like the score, and that was one of the reasons why that moment initially just made me laugh because she discovers something and there's just like a musical cue of like and then the camera's spinning upside down and I was like, that's stupid and that's lame. However, what sort of redeemed it is that it went in from that to being kind of a pretty long tracking shot.
Yeah,
that was all. It was a tracking shot of her kind of going through this very modern open house with the windows, and it was tracking her while also still spinning. And I was like, okay, that's a little cool. Like I wish that they had saved it for that moment. Like maybe she had the realization and looked over at him, and then as she's running through the house, you have that subtle tilt. But just like the moment where it's literally just whoop, like it's comical. How and it's like, yeah, I think even a high schooler can understand the visual symbolism of that.
Yeah,
it was like the cinematographer discovered the camera could do that, and he's like, "We should use that."
It's like, dude, you could do this with it. Like, no shit, buddy. Yeah, so that made me laugh. The music, again, I said bad. I don't want to say bad, but it was so on the nose. And it also felt like, other movies do this as well, where they kind of have like a score, kind of elevate a moment that maybe without the music, it might be a boring sequence. But this just felt so basic. It was just a lot of like of her just kind of going through stuff,
just very, very by the numbers.
Yeah, it just felt like this, like the composer wrote it in an afternoon. It's like, fuck it, here's tension. Yeah, it's essentially just repeating notes. What is it, staccato? Is that the term? Yeah, and it's like, it's very basic. It's not memorable, but it did stand out of just how cheesy. I don't even want to say cheesy, but I think you guys felt similarly.
Generic?
Like it felt like a generic like cop show on television.
For me, it's like I didn't love the music. I didn't hate it. I thought it was adequate, which is an adjective I'm using for this movie a lot. But there were a couple moments where I actually liked the music. It wasn't the music I had a problem with. It was the way it was applied to the movie, and that it was so. And like you said, Chris, movies use music to elevate whatever the emotion is, but usually in a more subtle way, whereas there was no subtlety here. It was literally like the movie was saying, feel this way right now. It was like so heavy-handed, I guess is the way to put it. Like you said, there would be that sort of leitmotif where, the husband is there and everything seems good, but then you hear that, you're like, okay, so he's the bad guy. Or then
it's the Jaws effect. It's the Jaws effect. Jaws is the one that's you hear the Jaws theme, danger's coming. If you do that with a film like this, though, you're like, I'm not going to be surprised by what happens. I have ears, and you're putting ominous music in here.
Right.
And for a film like this, you can't you can't approach it in that way. Otherwise, you're giving things away too easily.
Right.
Yeah. Because look, this is simultaneously not a bad premise, but it's also not really an original one. But it could still work. I think that there could have been tension, pulled from this situation. Essentially, of you're in a relationship, or I think people can relate to being in a relationship. They can relate to being, with someone, and then questioning everything they know about this person. And I think there could have been legitimate tension wrung out of this, of Frida Pinto's character just being like, what is with this guy? Like, what is he hiding? But like you said, Andres, they undercut that, one, by never really having anything besides one scene of Logan Marshall Green lying to her, which is still pretty obvious. There's never really that kind of like back and forth of like, did he or didn't he? It's all pretty obvious narratively. And then if you have any doubts, the music as well. It has like these lingering shots of him, and it's just like, again, that same music that lets you know, nope, bad guy. So there's no tension.
I got a couple things. My first one, my biggest problem is I don't understand the message this film is trying to convey. Like, is it you don't? But I mean, because they said in the film they were married for 12 years. So you're like, okay, like what is the moral of the story? Is my question. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean,
you never know.
You can never really know somebody, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like when they were making this movie, they were like, now the moral I really want to convey with this film, I don't think they put that much thought into it.
But I mean, you know what I mean, though. Like, they had a purpose for it, but what was what?
Yeah, it really just seemed like you never know. Essentially, it's just, or wouldn't it suck if? Dude, bro, wouldn't it suck if your husband was like a dick? Like, yeah, I guess it would.
Yeah, that's more of a sketch premise though than like a feature-length thriller film. So that was one thing that I just kind of took me out. The other thing, I was like, wait, so is he a serial killer then? What is he's got this room and there's I was trying to I'm like, you got to take me, where are we going with this? Is this a serial killer? Who is this man really?
They didn't make it clear. And I mean, the woman even talks about how like he hasn't actually hurt her yet. I mean, he's psychologically tortured her, but he hasn't physically tortured her. So he'll come down, she's chained to the wall. He'll come down, he'll just sit across from her in a chair with the baseball bat, not saying anything, just like looking at her. And then eventually he'll say like, I decide when it's time, which is a fucked up thing to do for sure.
I mean, yeah.
But it's not clear if he's, at least from what I recall, it's not clear if he's killed people before, if he just gets off on the psychological torture, if he ever actually plans on killing her. Not made clear.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, and what's the long term? Like, you've got this room, you've got this setup. What are you gonna do? I mean, is he feeding her? That's what I was wondering. I'm like, is he like bringing her meals? Like, hey, I decide. Here's a sandwich.
Right.
That's another thing that kind of made it feel very kind of TV movie-ish to me. Is not only did she look like terrific for seemingly being trapped in a dungeon for weeks at least, but if not longer, but then but after the big old scuffle and everything, like Frida Pinto still looks terrific. Like her hair is like flawless, and it's just like, this is again, it's not terrible, and it sounds like I'm really ragging on it, but it's just kind of meh.
Also, like, is she going to the bathroom or?
Yeah, like, what's up with that? Is she showering? She looks great. For like, I don't understand. Is he feeding her? So I also agree. It doesn't really explain like what does he do, and he talks a lot about like, I just have to do this, man, and he goes full on like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Hammy.
I wanted someone to be like, what? You have to do what?
Yeah.
Fucking tell me what. Well, I don't understand.
Kidnap people and just stare at them and just fuck with them. Like, oh, I could do it. I could do it when I want. It's like,
got a baseball bat. Not going to use it today, but
I feel like at some point that woman would have just been like, just fucking do something. God damn.
Yeah, like Jesus.
In the meantime, sleep well. I'll most likely kill you in the morning.
Yeah.
That was a Princess Bride reference for you youngins out there.
Oh my goodness.
One thing I actually liked though is when he's talking to the wife, whose name escapes me, but it doesn't
Frida
matter.
Pinto.
No, I meant the character, but
No, I know. Frida Pinto. That's your name.
right, yeah.
Frida Kahlo.
So
Got her.
he's basically he's equating his situation with her situation, saying like, you know, you didn't choose to have breast cancer. It's just part of who you are. And he's sort of equating that to his thing. He's like, I don't want to be this guy. I have a screw loose in my brain. And I thought that was actually I think there was a good nugget of an idea in there. I don't think they executed it as well as they could have.
Mhm.
But I thought there was a good idea there.
I just had a realization that I have as a counterpoint to what you just said.
Okay.
And it's a counterpoint to the entire film, really. What does she do for a living? What do they establish is her job?
She's a therapist.
Exactly.
Right.
A therapist would have been able to pick up on these red flags about this guy earlier on. How could you marry someone and be with him for 12 years and not be like, he seems kind of like a guy who would keep somebody in the room.
He's just so good at hiding it.
Right.
But he isn't. He's so bad at it.
Well,
So
remember, she doesn't have the musical score.
I
there
was
to
just
hide
going to
it.
say
That's
the
true.
same thing.
If she could
true.
listen to the music, she would hear it.
She'd be like, wait a minute.
Another thing I thought was kind of ridiculous is, so they establish early on when the cops first come, they're talking to either Frida Pinto or Logan Marshall Green, I don't remember. And we hear this like banging in the walls.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, it sounds like you got plumbing problems. And they're like, yep. And okay, so I get it. They want to foreshadow that something's amiss, but if you're the guy the architect who designed this house with a secret torture chamber, you didn't come up with something other than chaining her to a pipe that runs through the whole house.
That does serve the plot exclusively.
Exclusively. It makes no sense.
Mhm.
You would have I don't want to go here and make myself sound like a psychopath, but you'd have something else that's not running through the whole house.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing. What did he tie his wife up to? Hooks on the wall.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. I will agree though that it was an interesting idea. That again, they could have explored it. Sort of like kind of this desperate person trying to explain their need, their compulsion to do whatever the fuck he does, whether it's murder or torture or kidnap. That's interesting. It shows someone that's not just like, I'm evil, me. Even though he kind of becomes that. That's interesting. And I mean, I think that they have an entire show on Netflix. I don't watch it, but I think my wife does. It's called You, it's a pretty popular show, I guess. But it's about that, where like the main character is like a serial killer, different than Dexter. Like he's actually like a psychopath that will like kidnap people and kill them. But they go into the psychology of it a bit, and that's fascinating. But they just kind of bring it up towards the end and just kind of pay lip service towards it. So
Yeah.
it wasn't fully paid off, in my opinion.
Another thing for me is I believe the term is Chekhov's gun.
Yes.
Where if you see a gun in the first act, you got to fire it by the third act. And it's kind of a rule of screenwriting, and they bring it in the most like just hackneyed way. So early in the film, she's talking to a student or one of her clients or something, and she's like, when I first went on a date with my husband, he bought me a clock. And then at one point we see the clock, and then at the end of the movie, she kills him with the clock. You might say that she clocks him, but like literally the relevance to the plot prior to her killing him with it is he got me a clock. There it is. She could have killed him with anything.
Yeah, it's well, there's two things that I think, but go ahead, Andris. I interrupted you, but I have two thoughts on it.
There's multiple weapons in the house, and she chose the clock. There's a handgun she didn't know about. There's a baseball bat. They could have. This is one thing I kept thinking as they were running up the stairs. Kick him down the fucking stairs,
right?
Yeah, and she does a thing of after she hit him once, she like dropped it. I don't know, but what I was gonna say is that there's two things. One is it's the very, very obvious kind of metaphor of it representing how they met and kind of what brought them together as a couple. And it says Boston, Massachusetts, which is where they met and where they got married and where they lived before. So it's a symbolic link to their past, and she's using it, blah, blah, blah. So that's obvious. To me, it also looked very phallic. Like every time they saw it, it was like it had a base and it looked like a dick. And
he's like,
yeah, and he's a guy. Yeah, it's very, and he just jacks it off. No, and
no, he really was sitting there and groping it in scenes, though.
I didn't remember that.
Forgot
But
that.
but essentially, he kidnapped a woman, and then towards the end, the kidnapped woman is chained down and his wife is chained down. So it felt like it was also kind of an on the nose of like use this phallic imagery to smite the male oppressor, which is not a problem, but it's just like, all right, it's on the nose. But I agree. It is also like they set this up to have those very on the nose meanings, but it's like you literally could have grabbed anything. Like, where's the bat? Grab a steak knife, grab anything. It doesn't have to be that. Is that the heaviest thing in the room?
A chair would do the job.
Anything.
My husband got us this chair when we first got together.
Yeah.
This chair with spikes on it.
Right.
No, it was like the worst game of Clue ever. She had all these murder weapons and she went with the bludgeon. No, one thing though, I will say, this film had a different thing that horrifies me personally. I don't know if you guys have this problem. I'm a city guy. I live in the city. This fucking house in the middle of nowhere. I was like, nope, I don't like this movie. No, thank you. Can I go to the city now where there's city and people and lights? And then like
funny, yeah.
And then, if other things happen, whatever. But I was too busy just being like, nope, don't like this house. Look at those windows. Who could see me? I could be in my underwear in that house. Fuck that place. Where are the shades?
Well, and they did make a point of like constantly showing how like there's nobody anywhere for miles, and it was like very obvious. And I'll say I'd love to weekend there. That would be great.
Yeah, it's funny because I've thought about that before, not just for this movie, but how it's seemingly people who grew up in kind of rural areas, they feel unsafe in big cities. But people who grew up in big cities, like I myself also grew up in a big city, that's where I feel safe. Yeah, which is weird. Like I think I know it's not kosher to reference this guy, but Louis C.K. I think had a joke of just like growing up in New York City and just feeling like, yeah, I feel safe in New York being surrounded by murderers and killers and thieves. And there's something about like being near society that gives you comfort, and being isolated in the middle of nowhere. Like, dude, if you get hurt, if someone's attacking, yeah, you're screwed. So I felt that too, which, I think in better hands could have also like led to a feeling of isolation. But they really only did that once. I don't know if I didn't really feel like they really utilized that sense of isolation, except for one moment where Frida Pinto and the other girl are captured. And then the other girl starts screaming, and they cut to a wide shot of outside, and her screams are kind of drowned out.
Right.
Well, that was really the only time I noticed the use of like, hey, you're isolated. Everything else made it seem like, yeah, you're not too far from town. Yeah, the cops will come. So it's like, why even have it set there?
Mm-hmm. There's also that throwaway dog fighting plot point.
Oh yeah, there was
that's right.
Yeah, there was there was a moment where she's like, I'm gonna turn my husband into the police, and then she overhears a conversation that she makes a wild fucking leap with, because she just sees this guy being carried away. It's this guy that was intimidating her at this trailer park, so she already doesn't like him. But he's like being carried away. He's like, I didn't mean to hurt her. Fuck you. Blah, blah, blah. He could have been talking about anybody. And she just associated, he must be talking about that woman that disappeared. My husband's not a killer. Right. And it turns out that the guy was talking about dogfighting. And even if he wasn't talking about dogfighting, what a stretch to be like, I hear this guy being arrested. He says her must be talking about this woman. Like, why? Why would you make that association?
Not to mention, it's like, you're like, is this supposed to throw me off then? Because I don't like these people now because they're involved in dogfighting. Like, why?
It was meant to throw you off a bit about like, it's what's it called? It's not her husband. It's this guy, and it's like
it's the dogfighting people.
No, it wasn't when she finds out that it was dogfighting. That's what helped her realize that it was her husband. because before he was just saying, "Oh, I didn't mean to hurt her," and she thought it was the woman. But then it was like, it was a dog fighting thing, and she was like, oh, "It wasn't her. It was something else. My husband could still be a murderer."
That is so stupid and pointless to get the plot across, though.
Yeah, it didn't really work as intended.
Well, and okay, so here, and we should probably wrap up because we're just about at time anyway. Even though we'll have a good 27 minutes that I have to edit out of the middle because of the Zoom
it was
thing, but
not that long.
Yeah,
it was like
2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
But so the movie sort of essentially ends. She kills the husband, gets the girl out, cut to black, and that would have been a fine ending. If the credits had come up right there, that would have been perfectly fine, perfectly well and good. But then we get an epilogue, and I found this the most pointless fucking thing, because the epilogue is literally just, you see Frida Pinto and she's moving out of the house. Now, I think after this trauma, we could extrapolate that she would probably move out of the house. I don't think we need to see it. I don't think it was, it was the same ending as, the woman in the window, except at least with the woman in the window, she'd been an agoraphobic. And after this trauma, she built the courage to leave the house. This is just her moving out of the trauma house. But so it was pointless. All it did was add a couple of minutes. But my biggest thing is, the biggest wasted opportunity of that epilogue was, you're a psychotherapist who just saved this girl who was being tortured by your husband. Why aren't you helping her? Why aren't you giving her psychotherapy? You're a psychotherapist in this movie for pretty much no other reason. They could have done that. Chekhov's psychotherapist.
There's no reason. Nothing about her job came into play.
But why wouldn't you do it right at the end?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you, it was such an obvious thing to do. And then they just had her move out. It was such a pointless ending. What did you guys think of that?
Well, I hate to tell you, there was actually a post-credit scene that established something.
Was there?
No,
Are you
there
lying
wasn't.
to me right now?
You see, no, they are setting it up for a sequel. They found a demonic totem in the basement. And,
Excellent.
No, I'm bullshitting you. I
I
can't.
figured.
Yeah. Oh, but no, I had a similar thought. I mean, after it happened, because my wife just kind of joined me on the couch and she wasn't really watching it. But after that happened, I was like, wow, what an amazing epilogue, because nothing happened. Literally, it was just it cut to black after they escaped. I'm like, okay, that's the end. And then it was just and then the house sold, and then she drove away.
Yeah.
Okay. And I agree. It's if you had to have an epilogue, which you didn't have to.
You really didn't.
You could have had a scene of her talking with that woman, and then the woman we getting to know more about her so that she actually becomes a character, even if it's just at the very end. And then maybe they connect and they kind of we went through this together, and we're going to help each other move past this. Nothing. We don't even see that woman again. Fuck her. It doesn't matter. And she drove away. Also, there's no way that woman sold that house. There's no way. Unless she covered up his death and the murder chamber, there's no way you're oh, by the way, I killed my husband in here after he kidnapped another woman in the murder chamber. No one is buying that property.
Yeah, isn't there a thing in real estate where they have to tell you if somebody died in the property or whatever?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, absolutely. I don't, and there's no way. I know some people are in they've bought houses where people have died in before, but something tells me that big old modern house with torture dungeon chamber, I'd be you got to cement that up before I buy this shit.
And really, for the epilogue, what we're talking about with the girl, it wouldn't have even had to be much. It could literally be, Frida Pinto dropping her at the hospital, right after this thing, and just giving her a card and saying, listen, if you need to talk, I'm a therapist, whatever. Just something like that to say, okay, there's going to be a connection between these two characters going forward. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. But they, like you said, Chris, the movie was just fuck that girl. We just never see her again. She gets out of the basement.
She's just a plot. She's just a plot point. She's not a real character. She's just, oh, maybe my husband kidnapped her. Oh, he did kidnap her. Don't worry. Don't say anything. Just scream. All right, at the end. Okay.
Right.
Guys,
go ahead.
For real though, Intrusion 2, The House Wins. make it a fucking horror movie. He haunts the house now.
He just switches genres.
He just starts possessing the next couple that moves in, and he's acting all weird. I'm telling you,
I'd watch it. I would watch it.
I'd rather watch another spooky ghost movie than whatever this was.
And think about that title, The House Wins. Bam!
I would also have accepted The House Always Wins.
Oh my God.
You know?
I'm surprised that's not a Bond title yet.
It's true, eh?
Yeah.
Maybe it will.
We'll workshop it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So final thoughts, or shall we sort of wrap this up here?
Skip it.
Okay. Yep, that's kind of where I'm at. I said in the non-spoiler, like, listen, if you're looking for a thriller specifically on Netflix, you could do worse than this movie. The Open House comes to mind. I rarely on my channel have I gone as hard at a movie as The Open House. It's god awful. So you could do worse, but I also feel like you could probably find a better way to kill 93 minutes of your day. So that's going to be a no from us, dog. So we're gonna wrap this up. I guess before we sign off here, I guess I'll throw it to you, Chris. Where can people follow you online?
I have an Instagram account. I have an
Instagram account.
Oh my God, an Instagram
That's
account.
That's a movie premise.
Yeah. It's called Art of Light and Shadow. It's a fun kind of blog about cinema. I post everything that I watch, but not only that, I do a lot of like rankings. I do a lot of community-based voting. That's a lot of fun, like, best directors tournament, favorite films of this decade, stuff like that. A lot of fun, so check it out. Art of Light and Shadow.
Andres?
There was something floating right there. I don't want you guys think I'm crazy.
It's the ghost.
It's
the house
ghost.
Always wins.
Anyway, now that I've done my Joker laugh, if you do a YouTube search for Cheap Thrills Unspeakable Terror, you will find my reviews. I do reviews of low-budget sci-fi and horror from the dawn of cinema to the modern era. I just celebrated a year.
Yay! I don't know if clapping picked up on the microphone, but I was clapping.
Up.
Oh boy.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
And thank you for the shout out on your most recent video. I appreciated that very much.
Yes, Court is the man.
So, and of course, you guys are already here on my YouTube channel, Courtshake. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you forever if you did. Again, we want to encourage you guys, if you dug this, to drop a like on the video, share it around, helps the channel grow, and we love that. We appreciate that. Of course, jump into the comments, tell us what you thought if you saw Intrusion, or what you're worried about getting postponed because of this potential looming strike in Hollywood. Whatever you think about all the nonsense that we were talking about here today, do jump into the comments. Again, I read all the comments. I respond when I can, so don't think your stuff is going unread. And once again, we want to remind you that, of course, you can find the audio versions of these podcasts on places like Google Podcast and Spotify. So check that out if you feel so inclined. And as always, we just want to just say that we hope you guys are all staying safe, staying healthy, taking care of each other. Let's just keep trying to get through this thing. And I'm not sure, guys. I haven't mentioned this to you. I don't know if I can do the podcast next week. So Chris, you and I will talk about that. So we may be off next week. We may be back. But either way, there will be more podcasts in the future. So thanks again for watching, everybody. We appreciate it very much. And we'll see you at some point in the future. Okay.
Sounds great.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Later.